Hi everyone. Today I'm joined by Mike Jezoshek, CPA, brand ambassador at Insight, and also founder and host of the Small Business Tax Saving Podcast. For those of you who don't know, Insight is a full service accounting practice located out of West Palm Beach, Florida, offering accounting, bookkeeping, taxation, payroll, and advisory services. Mike and his team are industry leading practice that puts technology first for small, medium business owners. Mike also doubles up, as I mentioned, as the founder and host of the Small Business Tax Saving Podcast, which has a mission of helping hardworking business owners overcome complicated taxation rules, which can often lead to overinflated tax bills. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited.
Awesome. I mean, look, now I wanted to kind of pick your brain about a bit more of a forward-looking statement. Obviously, the ways that people are developing integrations, obviously, I know that firsthand. But then even outside of that, the way that technology firms are identifying inefficiencies across the accounting space and developing new technologies to, shorten the time that one type of workflow can take is increasing in number. And the way in which accounting practices can find these applications are becoming, more easily accessible. What's your view on, I guess, the next big thing in the accounting technology space?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big thing in the U.S. specifically is a tax software. Right now, there's some tax software that say they're cloud-based, but there is some, it's more just like a virtual computer. There's one tax software that is 100% cloud-based from a reputable company, Intuit. But I just think that, not only on the tax prep side and how that's talking to your accounting software, I think that there's a lot of development there. When we look at the tax product that we use, which is an Intuit product, it does work with QuickBooks Online, but we don't use QuickBooks Online. So it's that same scenario where we have a software that we utilize, the integration doesn't work with that software. So there's added time there. And I think that there's a lot of room for disruption on the tax side, especially in the US. And it's not just on the tax prep side, but also the tax planning side. When we're looking at quarterly estimates, how much do I need to pay on a quarterly basis? What are tax strategies that I can be implementing? That's, I think, where we're tying those into all, not just your accounting software, but tying in tax prep, tying in tax planning, quarterly estimates, your accounting software all together. I just think there's a lot of room for disruption there. Now, thanks to our lovely government, we have very complex tax codes and ever-changing tax laws. So I think that's what is really that pain point. That's kind of that sucker that's saying, hey, this isn't as easy, or everyone knows it might be a problem, but it's not as easy to fix as one might think, simply because of the complexities. But then when I go deeper into that, it's a lot of these things on. We spend a lot of time with getting information from clients. And so what type of automation, how can we make that painless for not only our team, but the client? A client is hiring us to do some of their work, but we also need stuff from them. And the client oftentimes feels like we might be asking too much. Why do you need this, this, and this? Well, we need this, and this to have, more accurate financials. But because we have to ask them or get something from them, it's just making that process a lot more difficult, taking a lot more time to gather that information from them. So, that piece, I think that there's room for disruption there, and there's different pieces of software that pop up and solve a problem, but it's not always something that's a complete overarching solution.
Yeah.
And then we look at that and say, that's fine. Like, if a software is really good at one thing, data gathering for transactions, what was this for? Why did you spend this much at Walmart? That's good if that's all they do. But then we also say, how can we integrate that with maybe another software that is good at data gathering for loan statements and everything else? And that's where that integration piece comes in. We look at software is that, I don't expect one software to be great at everything. And because I've seen the softwares that claim that they are, and there's weaknesses in different areas of it. But I think as a software developer, it's the piece of understanding that, hey, we don't need to be great at everything, but if we're great at one thing, how can we integrate with another company that is great at the thing we're not, to help create more of a seamless solution across all of them? and making sure that integration, again, as we kind of talked about, is something that is set up properly and really talks to each other, and it's not just kind of this afterthought of an integration.
Yeah, and I think it's very important when anyone uses the term integration, it's automatically connecting two different softwares that shouldn't ordinarily talk to each other. Now, when you make such a big statement, again, the trust that customers place in you is that the two systems need to talk in a perfect manner. So I think that's why just being clear and upfront from the outset about exactly what your integration does not only prevents time wasting, but it also, adds another layer of confidence and trust in your product to start with. Because when you have that first negative experience, which will, ultimately come 1 or 2 days after activation, that's when I guess it's very hard to overturn that negative experience from the customer side.
Yeah, and I've always, we had a conversation about this a couple weeks back, but our company, when we first started our firm, we didn't have a project management system, and there wasn't any out there available to accountants. So we created our own. Unfortunately, that took longer than we expected, and it was more painful than we could have ever expected. And by the time we launched, there was a lot of competitors out there that had a much superior service than our offering. But one thing that we've learned from that, and one thing that we've learned working with other software companies, is to have something. If you have an idea, if you have a solution, let's get that out there. So we call it kind of minimal viable product. Let's get that MVP out there to gain that interest. And once we know we have interest, we know it works. Well, now we can take it and expand on it. But instead of having everything, this big robust with so many features work from the beginning, why not start as a small solution that we can just continue to build upon from there? And I think that was something that we learned painfully as a software developer in the beginning. But we correlate that to our service offering too. If we want to really dig into advisory type services, a move that we've made recently, that's maybe not something that we want to go all the way in year one. Let's start just taking it up a notch. Let's start offering this little extra piece of advisory. And from what we've seen, that we're like, clients love it. We do something as simple as when we send financials over, instead of just sending an Excel doc or PDF, we're including a video that walks through those financials. That's a very little easy thing, and all we hear is great feedback from that. So we're like, okay, clients love that.
Yeah.
Now that we know that, let's take it a step further. How can we do that next best thing and slowly get to that full-on advisor that we want to get to, without having to try something that we know doesn't work, or try something that we're not sure if it's going to work. And we also see that on the advisory side. We try something and there's no feedback. Clients say nothing about it. They don't appreciate it. They don't show interest in it. Well, that's an indication saying, hey, let's not spend a bunch of time on this task or this type of advisory level service, because clearly the interest isn't there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And look, I mean, as a final question to round things up, and I know you're a big advocate of this yourself with the podcast that you have started, but it'd be good for you to give some ways that, other accountants can stay ahead of the curve in terms of technology, automation, tax understanding. Again, it's an opportunity for you to, I guess, give a plug to your podcast, but, there are just now an abundance of different avenues that young and also mature accountants can access unique information about the new types of technologies, the new app trends that can actually help their business, succeed. Keen to know whether there are any, key subscriptions or platforms that you and the guys at Insight use to keep up to date.
Yeah, and I think when we look at this, the problem nowadays is that there's so much information, so many different areas, and you don't necessarily know the source of it.
Mhm.
And so you might go to TikTok, you might hear a tax strategy on TikTok, and all of a sudden, the client will show me a video, and I'm like, that's completely inaccurate. Like that's illegal. If you do what that TikToker told you to do, it's illegal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, someone will send me a client and they'll say, hey, TikTok says I can do this, and I'm like, you can do that, but it's much more complex than a 10-second reel might tell you.
Yeah.
And so it's finding those sources that you can know, like, and trust, and feel that whatever they're getting information from, that it's something that's a valuable source. And so as far as we listen to all sorts of podcasts, listening to various different websites. But the key thing is finding out which ones of those can you trust. And so I think it's doing a little due diligence in the beginning when you're first testing out a different area. If someone's talking about a tax strategy or talking about this type of way to do cash flow forecasting or whatever it might be, doing some due diligence on that and saying, hey, am I confident in what they're telling me? And a lot of times, most of the times, you will be if you're looking at the right sources. So I would think it's finding that right source, finding that that repetition of somebody that's been doing it for a while. If you see someone talking about tax strategies on TikTok for the past week, and they don't own an accounting firm, they're just out of college, like that might be something like, okay, we want to make sure that we can trust their resources. But at the same time, I think as an accountants, this is an area that we're really bad at is providing that content too, or knowing what to look into. And that's something as part of our small business tax savings podcast, we do a lot of listening. What are our clients asking us? What type of questions are they asking us? Because if we know if one client asks us that, there's probably 10 more that want to know the answer to that question that just aren't asking us.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at learning and looking at that kind of continuing education, I think the key thing is also spending that time to learn about it on the right topics. Don't learn about something that isn't relevant, isn't going to help your clients, because you're just wasting that time on areas that you could be spent on topics that are relevant to your clients. And so that's always been, where our podcast comes from, where our topics come from, are all sourced from clients or listeners of our podcast that say, hey, I want to know more about this. I need more details on this. And I think that goes again towards that idea of that minimal viable product. Is we might try creating content that nobody even wants, nobody even needs. And instead, let's try to resurface that and say, okay, let's look at what people are asking for, what people are need, and then let's develop our content or whatever it might be based on that analogy.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. That's really great insight. And I mean, for the audience listening or watching, where are they able to access your podcast?
Yeah, so our podcast is a small business tax savings podcast. You can find on any podcasting platform, or also going right to our website at taxsavingspodcast.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks for your time. Very valuable insights, and I'm sure everyone listening has learned a thing or two from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mike.